My friends, please subscribe to my channel, like the video, and write a comment, and we begin. Part 1. The letter. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawn of our suburban home, a picture of domestic tranquility. Inside, the air hung heavy with the scent of lilies, a bouquet I had bought myself earlier that day, a futile attempt to brighten the mood that had settled over our house in the last few weeks. I'd been trying so hard to ignore the growing distance between me and Daniel, the subtle shift in his demeanor, the way his eyes wouldn't quite meet mine anymore. I knew I should have said something about it, but I was afraid of what he would say back. I was making dinner, a simple pasta dish with pesto, one of Daniel's favorites. I had even gone to the store to pick up some fresh basil from the farmer's market, hoping to entice him to open up, to reconnect. The sound of the front door opening startled me. I called out a cheerful greeting, expecting to see Daniel's familiar face, but the silence that followed was unsettling. Then I heard the distinct thud of the mail hitting the hallway floor, a sound I was intimately familiar with, the daily ritual of checking the mail. I hadn't noticed the postman. My phone rang at the same time, and I was on the phone with Sarah, my best friend, when I heard it. My heart did not hurt. I was used to not having Daniel around. I went to pick it up, and that's when I saw the envelope. My heart clenched as I looked at the thick white envelope, the sterile, impersonal font of my married name, Mrs. Olivia Sterling, typed in a cold, almost clinical style. The return address was the office of Robert Caldwell, attorney at law. Robert Caldwell, the name of the attorney. A name that was, until this moment, completely foreign to me. I immediately knew, with a sickening certainty, that this was not a friendly letter, not a birthday card, not an invitation to a social event. This was something else entirely. This was something that would change my life forever. I knew there was no good reason for an attorney to contact me unless it was for something bad. A chill ran down my spine, raising the hairs on my arms. I reached for the letter, my fingers trembling, as if I already knew the devastating contents within. My fingers would become numb. It was time to call Amanda. We had been married for 7 years. 7 years of what I had genuinely believed was happiness, built on a foundation of mutual respect, love, and a shared vision for our future. We had built a life together, brick by brick, a beautiful home in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood, a cozy haven filled with laughter, shared meals, and the comfortable rhythm of daily life. We had a close circle of friends, couples who we had bonded with over the years, sharing countless memories and supporting each other through thick and thin. There was no dramatic history of fighting, no explosive arguments, no accusations of infidelity or abuse. In fact, the opposite was true. Our relationship had been characterized by a quiet, steady affection, a deep and abiding bond that I believed was strong enough to withstand the tests of time. We had our disagreements, of course, the usual squabbles that all couples experience, but they were always resolved quickly, with a compromise or a heartfelt apology. Daniel and I were good together, in the ways you would expect. We had been a perfect fit. That was one of the reasons why I had been so excited to marry Daniel. I had not loved other people, and he was nice and good. I believed in the sanctity of marriage, in the power of commitment, in the enduring strength of a loving partnership. I thought it was the best thing I would ever do. But lately, things had felt off. Subtly, insidiously off. Daniel had been distant, emotionally closed off, spending long, irregular hours at work and offering vague, unsatisfying excuses for his absences. He'd been preoccupied, his mind elsewhere, his attention wandering. He'd been emotionally unavailable, shutting me out, withdrawing from intimacy. I had tried, desperately, to connect with him, to reach out, to understand what was going on. But my attempts had been met with polite indifference, evasive answers, and a growing wall of silence. He did not want to tell me his worries, or what was happening. I'd brushed it off as stress, as work pressures, as the natural ebb and flow of a long-term relationship. I told myself that it was just a phase, that things would eventually improve. But a persistent, unsettling unease had taken root in my heart, a feeling that something was profoundly wrong. The days were getting longer. It had been a long time. With trembling hands, I tore open the envelope and unfolded the letter, my hands already starting to become numb. The simple act felt monumental, as if I was tearing down a wall. The words swam before my eyes, blurring into an incomprehensible mess. I blinked, took a deep breath, and forced myself to focus. I had to know what this meant. I had to understand. The letter was short, stark, terse, and brutal in its simplicity. It was typed on a single sheet of expensive, embossed stationery, and the language was cold, formal, and devoid of any personal warmth. It stated that Daniel, my husband, the man I had pledged my life to, was seeking a divorce. It cited irreconcilable differences as the reason for the split, a vague, meaningless term that offered no real explanation, no insight into the sudden and devastating turn of events. The letter offered no apology, no regrets, no attempt to soften the blow. I began to get a strong headache, but I continued on, reading slowly. The letter went on to say that all future communication regarding the matter should be directed through his attorney, Robert Caldwell. All future communication. The idea that Daniel had hired a lawyer before telling me that the conversation I had had with my husband was more an act, and not because he loved me, filled my mind with pain. All communication through my lawyer. The phrase echoed in my mind, a cold, formal declaration of war, a calculated maneuver designed to sever all ties, to remove himself entirely from the emotional complexities of our shared life. It was a strategic move, a legal maneuver that reduced our 7 years of marriage, our shared dreams and aspirations, to a mere transaction. It was as if Daniel had erased me from his life, reduced me to a legal formality, an inconvenient obstacle to be removed with cold efficiency. I stared at the letter, frozen in place, numb with shock and disbelief. I read it again and again, scrutinizing every word, searching for some hidden meaning, some sign that this was all a terrible, heartbreaking mistake. But the words remained unchanged, stark and unforgiving, a testament to a decision that had already been made, a future that had already been determined. Everything was a lie. The pasta was already overcooked and sitting on the stove. Part 2, the reply. The initial shock, the numb disbelief, the crushing weight of the letter's revelation. It all crashed down on me at once. I crumpled to the floor, the expensive Persian rug doing little to cushion the blow. The carefully curated image of our perfect life, our perfect marriage, shattered into a million jagged pieces, the fragments cutting me with every breath. I was supposed to be making dinner. I had been smiling earlier. How could everything have fallen apart? What had gone wrong? I stared at the letter, my vision blurring with tears. The carefully controlled composure that I had maintained for so long finally shattered, giving way to a torrent of raw, unadulterated emotion. I sobbed uncontrollably, my body racked with grief and anger. I screamed Daniel's name, a desperate plea for understanding, a futile attempt to undo what had been done. But the silence of the house was deafening, amplifying my sense of isolation and despair. The perfectly cooked pesto pasta sat untouched on the stove, now growing cold, a stark symbol of our broken life, our ruined future. I didn't move, lost in the darkness of my grief. The heat was suffocating and the room started to spin. I finally decided to call someone and dialed Sarah, my best friend, her number etched in my memory from years of late-night confessions and whispered secrets. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and familiar, a comforting lifeline in the storm. "Liv? You okay?" Her voice was filled with a tenderness I appreciated. I burst into tears again, the words tumbling out in a jumbled, incoherent mess. I managed to convey the essence of what had happened, the letter, the divorce, the cold, calculated manner in which Daniel had ended our marriage. I kept on talking and repeating myself. Sarah listened patiently, her voice a calming presence in the midst of my emotional turmoil. She didn't interrupt, didn't offer platitudes or empty assurances. She simply listened, allowing me to vent, to rage, to grieve. "Oh, Liv," she said softly when I finally ran out of steam. "I'm so sorry. That's just awful. What a complete jerk." It was a brief, simple summary, but I loved it. I knew it had not been a good marriage, but it was never supposed to have ended like this. She asked questions, gentle probes designed to help me process what had happened, to understand the details of Daniel's betrayal. But I had no answers to give. I was just as confused, just as bewildered as she was. All I knew was that my life had been irrevocably altered and that I was facing an uncertain future. "What are you going to do?" Sarah asked, her voice filled with concern. "Are you going to talk to him? Fight it?" That was the question that had been swirling in my mind since I had read the letter. I wanted to scream, to rage, to confront Daniel and demand an explanation. I wanted to beg him to reconsider, to fight for our marriage, to salvage what was left of our shattered life. But I knew, deep down, that wouldn't do any good. Daniel had made his decision. He had drawn his line in the sand. And any attempt to reach out to him, to plead with him, to reason with him, would only be met with the cold, impersonal wall of his lawyer. It was time to accept defeat, to regroup, and to plan my next move. I had to think clearly. "What do you think? Is he a good guy?" I asked her. Sarah laughed. "You know he's not," she replied. Sarah had always hated Daniel and had no problem telling me. It had been a problem in our relationship at the beginning, but I realized that she was telling the truth. I started to see it too. After a long discussion about our future plans, I decided to take a nap. When I woke up, the plan was beginning to formulate. I was a paralegal, I reminded myself, a legal professional trained to navigate the complexities of the legal system. I knew my rights, and I knew how to protect them. I could do this. I thought about everything for a very long time, so I decided that I needed a plan. I spent the next few hours pacing, ranting, and crying to Sarah over the phone, drawing strength from her unwavering support. But deep down, I knew that I was on my own. This was my battle, and I had to fight it on my own terms with my own weapons. Finally, after much deliberation, after weighing all the options, I decided on my response. I knew Daniel was expecting me to be emotional, to be distraught, to plead with him to come back. He was expecting me to fight it, to make a scene, to create a mess. But I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. I wouldn't let him see my pain. I had to show him that I was strong, that I was in control, that I wouldn't be easily defeated. I needed to take time and figure out what I was going to do, how I was going to respond to this devastating blow. And the first step was to regain my composure, to reclaim my power. I sat down at my computer, my fingers trembling slightly as I typed a short, simple email to Robert Caldwell, Daniel's lawyer. Understood. 2 words. 14 characters. A message devoid of emotion, devoid of explanation, devoid of any indication of my inner turmoil. It was a deliberate choice, a calculated act of defiance. I was denying Daniel the satisfaction of seeing me break, of knowing that he had wounded me. I was signaling that I was ready to play his game, to fight him on his own terms, using his own rules. I attached a scan of my own lawyer's information, Amanda, to the email, a subtle but powerful message that I was not going to face this battle alone, that I had someone on my side, someone who would fight for my interests. I double-checked the email, making sure there were no typos, no inadvertent displays of emotion. It was cold, efficient, and impersonal, just like Daniel's letter. I hit send and closed my laptop, a strange sense of calm settling over me. The calm before the storm. Daniel wanted a divorce. Fine. He wanted to communicate through lawyers. Fine. He wanted to treat me like a stranger. Fine. I would play his game, but I would play it my way. And I would win. Part 3. The investigation. The days that followed felt surreal, like I was living in a movie, watching my life unfold from a distance. The initial shock and grief slowly began to subside, replaced by a cold, steely determination. I had made my decision. I would fight. Not for Daniel, not for our broken marriage, but for myself. Amanda, my lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman with a reputation for being a formidable opponent, advised me to gather as much information as possible. She emphasized the importance of knowing what I was up against, of understanding Daniel's motivations and his potential strategies. "We need to understand what he's trying to get out of this divorce, Olivia," she said, her voice firm and unwavering. "We need to know what he's hiding, what his financial resources are, who he's been associating with, what his plans are for the future. The more we know, the better prepared we'll be to protect your interests." She was right. Information was power, and I was determined to amass as much power as I could. I started slowly, taking small steps each day, feeling more certain and less sad. I'm good at finding information. It was one of my strengths, a skill honed through years of working as a paralegal, sifting through mountains of documents, piecing together fragments of evidence, and uncovering hidden truths. I did not see my sadness lasting for too long, but this was different. This wasn't just a case, it was my life. And the person I was investigating was the man I had loved, the man I had trusted, the man who had betrayed me. I was determined to dig deeper, to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I started by quietly accessing our joint bank accounts and credit card statements, meticulously reviewing every transaction for any sign of unusual activity. I scanned for large withdrawals, suspicious transfers, unexplained expenses. I felt like I was invading Daniel's privacy, but I justified it as necessary self-defense. He had already invaded my life, and he had to be stopped. I also discreetly contacted some of our mutual friends, the couples we had shared so many meals with. My parents told me not to contact them. Daniel probably was also telling them not to contact me. These people had always mattered to me, but they were now being taken away. I tried to talk to them, to feel them out, probing for any hints or rumors about Daniel's behavior. I asked casual questions about his work, his hobbies, his state of mind. I watched their faces closely, analyzing their words for any clues that might shed light on his sudden decision to end our marriage. But they always diverted me away from my questions or said that they had not heard anything. I did not know what to do. I listened carefully to their stories, their anecdotes, their casual observations, searching for any inconsistencies, any red flags, any indication that they knew more than they were letting on. But the thing I was looking for never came. What had happened? Why? Why? I started to feel like I was going crazy. I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating, I wasn't functioning. The house felt empty and silent. I was starting to think I could not work this way for long. I was losing it. I was starting to feel like I had imagined the whole thing. But then I thought of Chloe, and I knew I needed to keep on going. Then, just when I was about to give up, just when I thought I had exhausted all my leads, I found it. A series of suspicious withdrawals from our joint savings account, labeled as business expenses. The withdrawals were recent, frequent, and for substantial amounts of money. The first one had been about 3 months ago. The payments were frequent, and were being used to pay for restaurants that I had never heard of before, and that were in another city. These restaurants were also ridiculously expensive, like some fine dining establishments that I knew Daniel would not eat at, and the money added up to a lot of money. I knew this was not right. I knew I was onto something. This was the clue I had been searching for, the thread that would unravel the truth. Part 4: The Discovery. Fueled by a mixture of anger, suspicion, and a desperate need for answers, I became obsessed with uncovering the truth behind the business expenses. I looked up the business name listed in the financial records and discovered it was a small tech company, seemingly innocuous, located in another city, a city I had never visited. It also occurred to me that the people that did work there never seemed to show their faces anywhere. The information was scarce, the company's online presence minimal. There was no website, no social media profiles, no trace of its existence beyond a listing in a business directory. The lack of information only heightened my suspicions. It felt deliberate, as if the company was actively trying to avoid attention. I searched for the names of the people who were associated with the business, the owners, the employees, the investors, but found nothing concrete. The names I did find were generic and untraceable, leading me to suspect that they were aliases, fabricated identities designed to conceal the truth. Nothing felt real. I felt stuck. Everything was coming up as fake. I called different numbers and different names that I found online, but there was no answer, only voicemails and dead ends. It felt like the truth was deliberately obscured, hidden behind a veil of secrecy. I had almost given up. I thought, what was even the point? It was too hard. But I knew Chloe was always there. I knew my parents were evil. I needed to keep going for myself. I booked a flight. I flew down to that city, A city that I had never been to before, a city that held the key to unlocking the mystery surrounding Daniel's behavior. The plane was dark, and my mind was racing. I did not know what to do. I was running out of resources. The moment I landed, I felt a sense of foreboding, a heavy weight settling over me. The city was unfamiliar, the streets crowded, the buildings impersonal. I felt like an outsider, a stranger in a strange land, searching for something I couldn't quite define. I found the address I had, and then I found the building. It was a rundown office building, a gray tower that looked like it had been there for 50 years, its facade worn and faded. I thought about how fancy our home was. I did not understand why someone would live like this. I went inside and found the suite that contained the company's office. The door was locked. The windows were darkened, and there was no sign of activity. It was as if the company had vanished into thin air. A sign on the door said, "Closed for repairs." But the company was listed as available for business. I felt defeated. I wanted to be done. I tried to be patient, and then I saw her. Daniel and another woman, laughing as they strolled down the street. They were laughing, and the sun was warm on their faces. They were smiling at each other like the world was their own. The scene reminded me of Daniel and I. Her arm was linked through his, their bodies pressed close together, their movements synchronized. She was beautiful, younger than me, with long blonde hair that cascaded down her back, and a dazzling smile that lit up her face. They looked like a couple, happy and in love, completely oblivious to the pain and devastation they were causing. Everything that I had given to Daniel was being given to her. My heart sank. I wasn't surprised, not really, but it didn't make it any less painful. The sight of them together, so carefree and intimate, was like a punch to the gut. So that was it. He was leaving me for another woman. A woman with everything I would never be, everything I would never have. Daniel had not loved me. I wanted to run away from the truth, from the pain, from the overwhelming sense of betrayal. But I couldn't. I had come too far, invested too much. I needed to see this through. I followed them, keeping a safe distance as they strolled hand in hand down the street, their laughter echoing in my ears. They went into a fancy restaurant, a place I had always wanted to go to, but that Daniel had always refused to take me to. I couldn't bring myself to confront them. Not yet. I was in shock. I needed to think, to plan, to figure out what to do next. This was the most painful moment of my life. Then, a rush of strength took over me. I knew what I had to do. I was going to show them how wrong they were. I was going to fight. Part 5. The Checkmate. I returned to my sterile hotel room. The image of Daniel and the other woman seared into my mind. The shock was wearing off, replaced by a cold, calculating anger. I had seen enough. I knew the truth, and now it was time to act. I was finally ready for this day to be over. I needed to move forward, and I needed to make sure my parents knew what happened. Daniel would not win. I spent the rest of the night piecing together the puzzle, connecting the dots, and solidifying my plan. I re-examined the financial records, cross-referencing the suspicious transactions with the woman's name, which I had managed to obtain through some discreet inquiries. The truth was damning. Daniel had been secretly transferring money from our joint accounts to her for months, funding her lavish lifestyle, paying for her expensive clothes, her fancy dinners, her luxurious vacations. I could not believe the lengths he had gone to do this. He had created a dummy corporation, a shell company designed to conceal his fraudulent activities. He had used it as a conduit to funnel money to his mistress, disguising the transfers as legitimate business expenses. He had systematically looted our joint assets, draining our savings, jeopardizing our financial security, all for his own selfish gain. It wasn't just about leaving me, about breaking our vows, about seeking pleasure in another woman's arms. It was about theft, about deceit, about systematically dismantling our life together for his own selfish gain. This was not the Daniel I had married. This was a monster, a con artist, a predator. The tears threatened to return, but I pushed them back. I had no time for grief, no time for self-pity. I had a mission to accomplish. The next morning, after a fitful night of restless sleep, I called Amanda, my lawyer, and told her everything. I recounted the events of the previous day, the discovery of the business expenses, the trip to the other city, the sighting of Daniel and the woman, the evidence of his fraudulent activity. She listened intently, her silence punctuated by occasional gasps of disbelief and outrage. "This is gold, Olivia," she said, her voice sharp and decisive. "This changes everything. We can not only get you a favorable divorce settlement, but we can also press charges against him for fraud and embezzlement. We can go after everything he's gained through his deceit. We could take him apart completely." I had to show her what that had happened. "I want everything, Amanda," I said, my voice cold and determined, devoid of any emotion. "I want him to pay for what he's done. I want him to lose everything he's gained through his lies and deceit. I want him to suffer the consequences of his actions." It was time for Daniel to answer for his choices. I then contacted the IRS and provided them with all the evidence I had gathered. I knew that Daniel had been evading taxes for years, hiding income, inflating expenses, and engaging in other shady accounting practices. I wanted him to face the full force of the law, to be held accountable for his financial crimes. Amanda filed the divorce papers, including a detailed accounting of Daniel's financial improprieties. She also contacted the authorities, providing them with all the evidence of his fraudulent activities, urging them to launch a full-scale investigation. The plan I had was complete. A few weeks later, the hammer came down. Daniel was arrested on charges of fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. His assets were frozen, his reputation was ruined, and his life was turned upside down. The truth that was hidden was finally out, exposed for all the world to see. I saw him being taken down in the news. It was real. When Daniel called, desperate, pleading, begging for forgiveness, I did not answer. Instead, Amanda, my lawyer, intercepted the call, informing him that all communication should be directed through her office. It was a taste of his own medicine, a dose of the cold, impersonal treatment he had so readily dispensed to me. As for the divorce settlement, I got everything. The house, the savings, the investments, the assets. I took everything I was entitled to, and then some. I was not going to make the same mistake again. I also demanded a public apology, a full confession of his crimes, a written statement acknowledging the pain and suffering he had caused me. He refused, clinging to his pride, unwilling to admit his guilt. But I didn't care. The truth was out, and that was enough. I did not need him to apologize. A year later, Daniel was convicted on multiple counts and sentenced to several years in prison, his once privileged life reduced to a cold, sterile cell. The beautiful young woman, it turned out, was also scamming him, taking advantage of his wealth and his desperation. He had been a victim of his own desires. He had made his bed, and he had to lie in it. As for me, I picked up the pieces of my life and moved on. It wasn't easy. The scars of betrayal ran deep, but I was stronger than I thought. I had survived a heartbreak, conquered adversity, and emerged victorious. I could do anything. I was not living my parents' life anymore, and I was going to go where I wanted. I was living my own life, building a future filled with purpose, passion, and genuine connections. I had sold the house, invested wisely, and started a new career, doing something that truly fulfilled me. I never wanted to become as evil as my parents had been. I had gotten a new dog. My new best friend would always stay by my side. Sometimes playing the game by their rules, mastering their strategies, and turning their own weapons against them is the best way to win. And sometimes, the greatest victory is simply walking away, leaving them to face the consequences of their actions, while you create a life filled with joy, love, and authenticity.